Welcome everyone to another EOS Talk. Today is Saturday, October 20th, 2008. I am Official Fuzzy. I join here with a group of motley computer nerd, cryptocurrency, blockchain nerds every week. And we do this as an open agenda, a humble little place where we've discussed things in the crypto space for a long time and have been discussing things that have largely come to pass. So if you're one of the people who's been listening for a long time, you'll realize and recognize that we have a pretty good record. And we haven't focused on when moon, where moon. We've focused on when value, where value. And I think it's a very stark difference between what you see in most of crypto. And that is one of the reasons why I love this community. I love what we've done. I love all the people who are out there helping us in small ways and in big ways. Everybody who's part of this movement, you have a role to play. So those of you who have stepped up, I greatly appreciate you. Now, with that said, we join up every week to discuss things all EOS related. And of course, you've heard me say EOS is the exponential operating system. If you've been listening for over a year now to the EOS talks. So if you have been paying attention, you've heard us talk about exponential operating system. And we've been discussing a lot of things around that concept. Now, obviously, that has not been the primary focus of the EOS community. They've been focused on mainnet primarily. But I want to ensure that as we go forward through this technology, that people don't forget that the technology itself is open source. It's DPoS. EOS is a delegated proof of stake technology that we helped found in the Beyond Bitcoin community because it scales, because it forms the basis from which we can build so many mass adoption capable use cases. And not only that, we can do it in a way where people have sovereignty over those use cases, and that we can do it in a way where we can potentially replace the internet that we see today with an upgraded internet that gives us all the power and the control over our own identity, our own information, and our own value. So this is a paradigm-changing technology. But up to this point, the closest thing we could get to is, hey, I've got a white paper. It's a peer-to-peer cryptocurrency, and it's going to be mined. Just like Bitcoin, it has a little bit different name. It has a few variables changed. Or, hey, we've got this dApp called CryptoKitties. None of it has worked. And people keep in cryptocurrency saying, why will it not reach mass adoption? Well, I'm here to tell you, as we have from the very beginning of this, the reason why it hasn't reached mass adoption is because whenever it tries to, or whenever there's a viral use case, it can't handle it. It can't handle the scalability. And if it can't handle the scalability, they can't even touch the governance. So if we're talking about scalability, governance, the ability to reach consensus in a truly decentralized manner, we have to talk about the future and how we're going to leverage scalable blockchain technologies, because otherwise we're spinning our wheels, wasting energy on something that doesn't really have a good solution after 5 to 10 years. So with that said, we do have this technology today, and if you guys can show everybody the forums real quick, we do have forums called EOSTalk.io. And if you go look at these forums, you will see that they are based on delegated proof of stake. Well, you won't see that. That's kind of the good thing about it. You won't see that it's based on delegated proof of stake, but what you will see is that it is very much like the forums of the past that you might see. There's only one distinct difference, is that it is cryptocurrency based, that you can have an economic layer in this ecosystem, which we do have on EOSTalk.io. And it is a censorship-resistant place where you don't have to worry about if you post something there, a moderator might be able to hide it, but they can never take it away completely, right? You might be able to make it better for the user experience, for those of you who are there and you don't want to necessarily have a scammer posting. But at the same time, it doesn't keep the user from being able to go look at that if they wish to, right? So what we're trying to do with this technology, and what we've said from the very beginning, is we want to open this technology up and let people use it to change the world in a paradigm shifting way. At a time when YouTube, Twitter, and all the social media networks are censoring, we're saying we can use technology like this to enable people to have the content they want to, be connected to that content, and also, if they choose to, have moderators who discard content for them and go through the content to find good content for them. So that's kind of what these forums are about. They're based on delegated proof of stake, and we've had them here since before EOS to show people. But we do have some cool things that are going to be coming with that. Now let's go ahead and move on to Blocktivity. We always talk about Blocktivity. If you guys can pull that. Excuse me. I'm coughing here. Okay, so when you look at Blocktivity.info, you will see that there are some stark differences between the blockchains on Blocktivity.info at the top and the one at the bottom. This is very from the ones that, from the blockchains that you might see on CoinMarketCap. If you go and you look at CoinMarketCap, it is specifically a place where you look at market cap, the market cap of the chain, the individual price per token, the volume of that chain. And that has kind of become the standard, right? And I'm not ever against people having, hello, Dr. D. I'm not against people looking at the market cap, right? But one thing I do want to always make clear every week, just in case we catch a newbie who's looking at this, and even if you're not a newbie, to remind you that that's just one part of the equation. And it's actually probably the smallest part, right? Because if we're trying to talk about mass adoption, we need to talk about statistics and metrics that matter, okay? And what matters is the amount of activity that a network has and how much it can handle or sustain, right? And that's an important thing to make sure that we distinguish, because we want to ensure that people recognize which chains can scale and which ones are going to fail if they are required to perform on a mass transactional level. And if you can look on Blocktivity.info here, you'll see that there's activity as the first thing. It's not about market cap. That's actually the fourth in, right? As far as the valuation. The first thing that you see is the name. Next is activity. And the other one, the next one is average activity. And then the following one is the record, meaning the highest amount of transactions per day that have been on this network, any given network, right? And then you have, of course, the market cap. But then you have the AVI and CUI. And the AVI is essentially basically saying this is undervalued by X amount. You look at EOS, 146 is a lot lower than BitShares at 1,661. It's looking at the number of transactions and comparing it to the value, perceived value in the marketplace. And I think it's very important that we recognize this. I want to give some love to BTS here. A lot of people keep saying, I keep hearing it, and it blows my mind. People are saying that BitShares is a failed product or project. How can EOS fix what BitShares failed on? And I want to make it clear that BitShares, if you look here, is number 2. It is still a DEX where all these things can trade. It is sovereign in and of itself, and it is the longest chain in the world. But it's up there at number 2, right? So if you're looking at the two top chains in the world right now, they are EOS and BTS in terms of activity on the network. And the important point that I want to drive home on this before we move forward to the updates and all the cool stuff that we're going to talk about is that money follows value. It's not the other way around. And if it is the other way around, then it's temporary. And what do I mean by that? If I have a product that is consistently superior, over time, people are going to gravitate toward that product. And they might buy cheap alternatives that pretend to do what that main product does, that legitimate version does. But over time, people are going to realize, hey, this doesn't work. It breaks every time. It's not that project. It's not that product. But if you can provide a valuable product consistently, the value is going to come in. It's going to create value, right? It's going to bring people to it to give their value in return for something that they find valuable. And when we're talking about blockchains, obviously we have the immutable ledger, but what else do we need? We need to have it where when my mom and my dad try to use it, and everybody else's mom and dad try to use it, we don't see what we see at number 5 on F on Blocktivity, which is that big exclamation point over on the CUI saying that, 100% of the network is being used and there are people waiting in line, because that is not how we make it to mass adoption. Okay, so with that said, we always go through this, and I'm sorry to everybody who digs through it, but just for the record, you can usually get in about 10 minutes after we start, and you won't have to see this because about 10 minutes in, we usually are done with that part. But I do always make sure to make this very clear, because as people are discussing all the cool things and having their own shows, I love to hear all the people talking about these things. But one of the things that I want more and more to see is people using these types of tools like Blocktivity and showing them. And I have seen people using them, and I'm glad for it. But I think that we should always go further in that, and we should take people further into that, because the best way to get people on board is not to necessarily tell them. It's far better to show them, right? Now, with that said, we do have some updates tonight, and I have Doug here from Telos, and he has the Telos project. It's a blockchain that is based on EOSIO, and they are kind of changing some things up slightly, fixing a few things, making tweaks to the EOS IO code, and essentially making a project that will help us show the exponential operating system's value. And one of the things that I told everybody before we started this tonight is one of the things we are the place where that started. So I think it's very important that I start recognizing that we need to start bringing those people on more. And I need to start reaching out to them. And I need to start asking you guys, if you know anything that's a good project that needs to join up, to consider telling them to join up, because we want to hear, and what I want to hear is all the use cases of EOSIO technology and delegated proof of stake technology. I want to see this, because this is where Beyond Bitcoin becomes Beyond Bitcoin. This is where all this started and why all of it started. So with that said, I want to thank you, Doug, for joining up tonight. And I want to thank you and everybody from the Telos ecosystem, because it hasn't always been like a politically correct thing. And we know in cryptocurrency, there's a lot of tribalism. There's a lot of, I love my coin and I'll defend it. And that's great. But at the same time, I think it's important that people like you are around to tell people and show people what you're doing, because it's really a salient lesson that I want everybody to walk away with, to see that something like Telos doesn't necessarily take away from the value of the exponential operating system. Indeed, it can add a lot of value to the entire ecosystem. And with that said, I'll ask you if you want to step up and give an intro to yourself a little bit. I know you've been here before, but for those who haven't, who aren't familiar with you, and give any updates that you'd like to, and then maybe we can move into some discussions around that. And we have some other things we can talk to if we have the time tonight.
Thank you, Fuzzy. I would love to do that. Hi, everyone. My name is Douglas Horn, and I am with a company called Good Block, and we are part of the group that has been working publicly for about 14 weeks now to start one of the first public chains growing out of EOCO, and that's called Telos. A little more, I guess. So we launched this in response to one real primary thing, which is this concern that in DPoS, which is a system, as we all know, that's based really entirely on voting, right? That's how the consensus mechanism works. All really, when you come down to it, that is core to DPoS. It's the D in DPoS. And we were very concerned, I was very concerned, that most people in the system did not have a meaningful vote in the system. And that's based, I'm happy to talk about the numbers if anybody wants to, but
I think it's important actually if you could give the numbers and just explain it, because a lot of people here are maybe not here or maybe are here for the first time.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Fuzzy. Yeah, so the numbers are these. If you look at the ownership at the Genesis time, it's changed a bit, but we did most of our work there. 1.6% of accounts held over 90% of all the value on EOS, and that's enormous. And what that meant, the corollary to that, right, is that 98.4% of accounts held less than 10% of the value. That's the problem, right? Now, you can get granular about those numbers, and you can say, well, some of those big things are exchanges, and that's absolutely true. But the problem is, as we're seeing, there are exchanges that vote those tokens, and so it makes it a very relevant concern. So if we have 98.4% of all the accounts on EOS controlling only a total of less than 10% of the value equals votes, that means that the vast majority of people on the system really don't have a meaningful vote. And that's a problem because the whole system is based on votes. That was the main thing we came out of when we wanted to create Telos, because I think that it's important that everyone's vote matters. I think that one of the concerns people may have, one of the reasons people may not vote, is that they feel disenfranchised because their vote mathematically doesn't really matter, right? We see this all over the world, and all over the United States, for example, where I live, in systems, areas where people they feel that their votes mathematically don't matter, they just don't turn out, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I thought it was too early to get that kind of defeatist approach, and I thought it was something that was really not possible to fix on EOS. We couldn't really take people's EOS away from them, and nor should we. So as a response, I thought, what if we made a new chain but didn't have that could stay extremely close to everything about EOS that was working, but fix, number one, this tokenomic issue, and then fix a few governance issues as well, and those actually are equally important. And for example, one of the systems that I see as problematic on EOS right now is the fact that it going to have a very hard time evolving until ratification and amendment comes in, and until a worker proposal system comes in. Those are the things those are the mechanisms by which the owners of the network, which are all of us, get to express their decisions about what the network should become. And if you can't ratify or amend the existing governance, then you have two choices, and that is you stick with the system forever, or else you change the system and just sort of wink and nod at the fact that the governance as expressed, as written, isn't actually doing what, how is not actually how the system is run. I think both of those are bad. I think, and there is a third option, which of course is to work through a process to bring governance, to bring that ability to ratify and amend onto the system. So when EOS launched, and I was as culpable as anyone because I was one of the block producers working on the launch, and I spoke up on some of those meetings. And what I never said was, hold on, why are we launching this thing? Why are we in such a hurry to launch this thing when we don't have all the pieces that were described from the very beginning, like a functional worker proposal system and a functional ratify amend system. So that's my bad as much as anyone, but I thought that the way to fix that was to build that into a new system. So with Telos, we have promised that we are not going to launch the system until we have everything we've promised. And so we have like a checklist of count as opposed to a countdown approach to launching. And some of those things are all these governance pieces, like a real functional set of governance documents, which fortunately we now have. The ability to ratify and amend things, the ability to make the worker proposal system work, because actually the worker proposal system, I think, is an extremely important piece of the puzzle, because it's what allows the owners of the network, again, all of us, to express how we want to use the inflation on the network. Do we want to burn it? Some people do. They can vote for that. Do we want to use it for charitable causes or URI or UBI? Some people do. That's up to the network to decide. Do we want to use, how much do we want to use for development of ongoing development? How much do we want to use for marketing? How much do we want to use for some kind of something else, anything else, right? That really is the owners of the network's place to vote. And so I think that's a very important thing. So Telos launched with the different tokenomics and with a commitment to include all these important structures of a functioning governed blockchain actively from the beginning. And I think that it's almost impossible to think that EOS wouldn't be in a better position right now if they had some of these things, because there's a lot of challenges that they have that they're struggling very hard to fix because they don't have these structures in place yet. So in retrospect, I think it was a mistake to launch without them. A mistake that I and many other very smart people contributed to, but we didn't want to replicate that. That's really what Telos is. There are some really, we had a chance to add some really innovative things to try to help. So for example, we have our voting is inverse weighted voting. It's a way of encouraging people to actually vote the full 30, and that's basically a sine wave function. If you only vote one or two, your votes don't count for much, and if you vote 25 to 30, your vote basically has the full weight. That's one of the things we did. Another thing that we're doing is we instead of having an enormous number of standby block producers that are never tested, we have a fixed maximum of 30 standby block producers, but every one of them is tested every week. So if they are not capable of doing the job, then they are not getting paid, and everyone will know, and they can be voted out. Also, if they don't meet the minimum requirements, then they also are simply removed from the network. So we have a system that does this. We have a system that kicks them from the network if they are underperforming because and missing blocks at a rate that's unacceptable. And it's not, if this were to happen on the EOS mainnet right now, people would be up in arms. But on Telos, it will just simply happen. No one will get up in arms. People will fix their issues and come back on, and it'll be fine, because that's really what network resiliency is about. So we added some things like that. But the main thing is voting, functional governance, and a few resiliency additions. anyway, that's the big picture. Thanks, Fuzzy.
No problem. And here's I didn't want to interrupt you, but I do want to say that if you guys go look at the telosfoundation.io/launch, it's something that I really do like how you guys have it laid out and how you guys had this list here. And you literally go through, and if somebody is a Telos holder, they can go and check at any given time to see the status of all these various issues. A lot of people who are familiar with this type of stuff, you generally have to go look at a GitHub for a project to see where they are on various things, right? And let's face it, a lot of people don't know how to navigate GitHub. So
people think GitHub bites, not that it could bite, that it has teeth, right? People are afraid of GitHub.
Well, I probably won't tell my mom to go look at stuff on GitHub, I guess.
Fair enough.
So if I can tell her, hey, go look at the Telos Foundation IO/launch, she can go look at a list, and that makes sense to her, right? And those are the little things that we can't overlook. Also, as nerds, we tend to always think, oh, everybody understands this, but I assure you, in the masses, they don't. Most don't.
Right.
So what you guys did there was excellent, and I know one of the points that I want to make that I just really want to make sure that everybody doesn't overlook that you said here is you are able to test things on Telos, right? It's and that otherwise might never be able to be even politically tested on the EOS.
Right? That is true. That is true. Yeah, we have it's a sandbox. I want to be clear that it's not just a sandbox, right? But it's going to be a very functional, powerful network that should have as much power as EOS, right? But it is a sandbox, and it does allow new ideas to come on. And frankly, because we're going to have a lower value initially and some other things that we're doing, we are actively trying to bring on dApp developers that maybe wouldn't even be able to afford to deploy on EOS, right? And would otherwise have to stay on Ethereum, right? For which, as laughable as that seems to all of us, to deploy a new dApp on Ethereum late 2018, people are doing it because if you can't come up with the money to purchase the resources beforehand, then you're going to have to be on a system where your users are going to pay for it with a gas cost, which is also ridiculous. It's so anti-user, but so they're going to be stuck. You're going to be on VeChain or Tron or Ethereum, right?
Yeah, and I think it was very important also. You're kind of talking about the things that can be built, and I know that there are some dApps that are interested in already in joining the Telos project. But you guys have a good block announcement as well regarding some of the things that that now that most of this checklist is pretty much finished or getting dang close to being finished.
Yeah,
you're basically having the go no go votes, right?
Yep, our next one will be on Halloween, October 31st, and I think now I've said this before, but that I thought we were getting very close to be ready. One thing that happened, we actually got a setback in last week or a few days before that, and some of the things that we had green check marks on had to go backwards to not green check marks because they worked perfectly fine as written, but they were voting related, and we discovered a voting exploit, right? So we just had to go back to the drawing board on some of that stuff. But anyway, yeah, on October 31st, we're going to vote. And I think it's very likely that if we, that we may simply vote to go, we may say, we're going to go on day, we're going to go, 3 or 4 days out from today, if we're close enough. We don't want to switch over to sort of a countdown mindset, but it's possible that we'll be so close that we might as well, we might as well vote in that way. We'll see where it is. But yeah, the idea, I would like to see projects in the future do 2 things that Telos is doing, maybe more, but one thing I'd like to see is adopting the checklist approach. If you have a complex network that has governance elements or anything like that, do a checklist. Launch when ready, not on a timeline. And then the other thing, I would love to see a resurgence in projects like Telos that raise no ICO money, that have no centralized company behind them, and that are truly decentralized and distributed. That we've crypto kind of has lost. I mean, 2017, that sounded super passe, but I think there's a lot of advantages.
Yeah, and I think one of the advantages that that is present actually this kind of perfectly uh, moves into this direction is that you have the good block grants that now are opening up here. Right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited about that. Thank you. I was trying not to.
It's a perfect time for you to discuss it, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks. I will. So we have something called the good grant, and here's what's up with this. Good block is going to end up getting a fair amount of coins out of the founders rewards. How do we set up? We've just set up a network where we said, hey, whales are a problem, we can't have any whales, and now we're suddenly in a position to be considered whales. How do we make those things work together? And to me, the answer is we have to use those tokens have to be used in a very responsible way to make Telos and EOSIO grow. So what I was hinting at before was one of the main. So the value of all this, the value of all these is the dApps, right? It's getting dApps on this. Everything else is just preamble to getting dApps going and getting people using them. So the problem with the dApps is that instead, on those other chains, they don't have to come up with a bunch of resources. Developers don't beforehand because the users pay the resources in gas fees. But on Telos and EOS, somebody has to come up with a bunch of money. That means that developers with great idea have to figure out how to get that money made, and that get that money to get the resources. And that means that instead of developing dApps and making their awesome idea, they're out having to get venture capital funds or investors or run an ICO or do all these things that are everything except making a great dApp. How can we get that impediment out of the way? And so what these two ideas sort of came together, and we decided to use these funds that we're going to be getting to create a grant which allows exciting, innovative dApps to have all of their first years and actually more resources in CPU and net staked by GoodBlock. So we'll have these tokens. We're not going to get rid of them. We're going to hold them. So let's use the staking power to bring new dApps on board, and they can have a year or 18 months or whatever they need. Really, we're not going to kick anybody off at a we'll probably taper people off as available and as their needs allow. But the goal is give them time to build it, to get it on the network, to let users start using it, get used to it, and then transition into them, staking their own so that they can have an ongoing business, right? But don't put that huge impediment of a giant amount of tokens that must be bought in front of it. Get it behind it when the thing's making money. And it actually goes hand in hand with something we already had discussed in Telos, which is we have a Telos Foundation, which has its own endowment for promoting the network. And that is going to do things like, for example, the Telos Foundation is going to pay for at least the first 1 million new Telos accounts to be free and easy to create with some basic protections against abuse. But it's also going to have RAM grants to try to provide some or all of the RAM needed by dApps to into their hands. So if you can combine a good grant that handles your first year plus of net and CPU staking with a Telos Foundation RAM grant, then basically you as a dApp developer just have to focus on getting your dApp made and connecting with people and making it useful, not on going out and raising money and all this stuff, right? We want you on the network. So we want to give out good grants. The Telos Foundation wants to give out Telos Foundation RAM grants. We are committed to getting people onto Telos, and by getting them onto Telos, we get them onto the EOCO system, right? I know that some people are going to see this as a move to pull people away from EOS, and for some it may have that effect, but in a larger sense, it's going to pull people away from systems where they expect users to pay for it with gas fees, which gas fees are ridiculous. Everyone hates gas fees. It's, this lets people build their dApps on, a great network that's really user focused. So yeah, thanks for letting me talk about that. The good grant, it's at goodblock.io/good/good grant. And yeah, take a look, especially if you have dApps. We're going to have, we are very serious about this, and we are front loading these things so that things that are shovel ready now, and it's not required that they be open source, but obviously it's nice if they're open source. It's a feather in their cap. Things that are cool, things that are innovative, things that people care about. Those are projects that can get funded with these very quickly.
Fawn Solo asks here, how do you believe that this will affect bandwidth leasing? And I should say the demand for bandwidth leasing.
Well, I mean, at most so here's the thing. We're gonna have a few million tokens. It's a lot for that's at most, right? It's a lot for any individual to have on a network where things are initially capped at 40,000, but it's not a lot compared to the 332 million tokens that are going to be on the network. So I don't think it'll have any appreciable effect on it. I will say that because we're in an early stage, in a stage where we can still affect our governance swiftly, right? Because even though ratify amend will be available from day one of the network, it still is going to take 3 months to pass anything. We're in an early phase now, and we can pass things, over a week if people discuss it, and the governance working group agrees that it's in the best interests and the ethos of the network. So I actually am pushing for us to discuss enabling resource exchange, at launch or as soon after launch as possible. So I think that bandwidth leasing I think that will be bigger, but people still need to come up with money for that. I don't know how the answer is. I don't know how it'll affect it. It won't. It's not such a large amount that it's gonna radically alter it though.
Yeah, what I find interesting, and this is something that we've talked about from the very beginning, really. I mean, we've been talking about using the bandwidth in the network to essentially fund the development of these different projects, because like you said here pretty clearly, and I agree 100%, is one of the barriers that a lot of developers don't want to deal with is how do I pay for food while I'm building what I love, right? And
oh yeah, for sure.
And I guess let's take it and make it even worse. It's like, okay, well, sure you can eat, but can you afford to build what you need to build? Can you afford the servers for it? Can you afford all these things? If and maybe you can, if you don't have to worry about buying a bunch of bandwidth up front, right? Because let's face it, there's also a risk. Even if you have a great idea, there's a risk that maybe it won't take on. Maybe people just won't want it at that time.
Yeah, we can't eliminate all risk, but we can. By eliminating some of the risk, we can be in a much better position. By the way, one thing I didn't mention is Good Block takes no revenue from that and no ownership position at all. It's not a VC thing. It's a let's get you on the chain thing.
Yeah, and I believe that we should have VCs. I believe we should have hackathons and all these things. But at the same time, I can't help but think my gosh, how many resources do we spend on those things when we have a lot of people? I see them all over the place who want to develop dApps. And if there's a grant program for them to be able to build those, I think it's a wonderful thing, no matter where it's at in Depot's.
Right. And hey, let's be honest. This idea is, you know, I have no patent on this idea. This is an open source idea, and there are a lot of people. You know, there are going to already a lot of people in EOS who have way more tokens on EOS than I will ever have on Telos. And if they want to do the same thing, well, I think that would be great. You know, I don't know why this idea doesn't catch fire, because it's an even bigger impediment on EOS than it is on Telos. So steal my idea, you know, and and make it better. I don't care. It's a win for me.
Yeah, one of the things I've learned in crypto, and I was talking to PowerPix before the episode actually, is you can look at F, and that's a perfect example. It's really why we bash people across the head every single time we have one of these EOS talks with Blocktivity. And it's because, you know, you would think that all those things would be, the market would be completely rational, right? People wouldn't want to build on F at all because it's just not going to scale, all these different things. But people still choose to do it sometimes. And there's not always, yes, the market is rational as an average, right?
Right. And over time, over periods of time, but not over short periods of time. It's generally not rational.
Exactly. Exactly. So I guess my point is that I think that we're in this space where most people are still so stuck on, whenever you tell them, my gosh, CryptoKitties, like PowerPix posted this picture in here, you tell them about CryptoKitties, and it's really hard for them still to even deal with the fact that most chains can't scale, let alone any of the other stuff that we're talking about, right? So these brilliant ideas are indeed brilliant, but most people are just so far behind on that stuff because of crypto being so far behind on it, that you're not only fighting to try to get people in EOS and Depots to see things, you're also kind of trying to get the people who are even outside of that, right? Which is
yeah. But the win is, so the way to do it, I think, is build the damn dApps, build the damn things, get them out there, get people using them. That's the only way forward for any chain. And honestly, I think that whatever chain best does it wins. And when I say this, by the way, I mean very clearly Telos. I consider Telos and EOS to essentially be the same chain for this, you know, because it's the same technology. When I talk about things compared to Tron or Ethereum or VeChain or Neo or any of that, you know, EOS Telos is one chain. Now, when we're talking about the other things, it's, of course, it's different. But for all intents and purposes, getting people into the EOS system is what matters, and getting people onto these chains is what's going to separate the one that ultimately gets adopted, right, from the one that doesn't. You know, and EOS, Telos, 50 other awesome public DPoS chains can coexist together, and in 2 years' time, you're just going to use Scatter, and it's going to, or some similar tool, and you may not even really know what you're on, because you will have set it to just buy tokens on a just in time basis as needed from, you know, and just from an instant DEX. I mean, it's going to be so transparent, and it needs to be, right? Because most people don't want to know about this. But EOS Telos has everything going for it to be the one, right? Because it has no gas fee, which is super anti-user. It has amazing scalability, right? It's the only one of any of them right now that you can push a button and see the transaction confirmed, you know, before your fingers left the button, and which is the user expectation, and they're not going to accept anything else, and no other chain can actually do that. So it's EOSio has every capability of winning. Now, what's the best way it can win? Build dApps. What's the best way it can build dApps? Have 2 or 3 or 4, collegially competing chains that compete in the way that they just make each other do better and be more innovative, right? That's always a win. And get these things built, because once people start using them, they're not going to care that it's blockchain. They're just going to think, wow, this is really cool. This is a kind of Facebook where my information doesn't get stolen. This is, like I think we should just pose everything as the real world solution. This is the kind of Uber that doesn't have a horribly racist, misogynistic CEO and pays its drivers more and costs less for users, because there's no centralized company that's looking to make profits in the middle, right? So each one of these use cases is a huge win, right? This is the form of voting that our small town is going to use, because elections are frankly just too expensive and not deterministic enough. And God forbid our town of 30,000 people should need to have a recount, and we have to come up with $1.5 million for that, right? These things, when we could so totally solve all these problems perfectly, if we focus on the solutions and forget to put the word blockchain by an asterisk way down at the bottom, people will come on board.
Yeah, and it's funny because we come from, before EOS was Steam, which was a mutual aid society chain, or what I call a MASDAQ, right? And we have this whole concept that emerged from there, kind of the concept of, hey, I can post to Steam, but I can also post to whale shares at the same time. Both communities can compete to reward me as the user, which is completely turning the current paradigm on its head, where all these different companies are competing to steal from you, right? So what I see on this is pretty much the same kind of concept, only now instead of it just being for social media, it's for dApp developers and people who want to use dApps that are, various different dApps. And if you literally have multiple different chains that are competing to reward the best dApps, well, by God, now we're going to have the most viral, sexy dApps out there that nobody's not going to want to use. I'm going to tell my mom about it, and she's going to use the word sexy. She's going to say, wow, that's a sexy dApp. And I'm going to be like, Mom, I shouldn't have shown you. That's the type of stuff that's going to happen. And
oh, yeah. Because they won't even know. They won't even know. Yeah. Most people want to just interact with it. Like, oh, I have to buy some coins. Okay, that's a credit card thing. Okay, and from now on, I'll just do this and it's fine. Okay. And if I need some coins on this new chain that's really cool and has a couple dApps I want to try out, it'll just, but my instant DEX will just trade those over, right? It's not going to be like, it's not going to be, the length of time that this tribalism between EOS and Telos and Warbly and whatever continues to persist is going to be measured in mayfly lives, because Fuzzy, 1 year from now, if somebody says, oh, I hate Telos, I'm all EOS, or vice versa, we're going to laugh at them. We're going to laugh at them like they're talking about buggy whips or something, right? No one will think that. It's all going to be the same to people. And deep down at a protocol level, it will be slightly different. But, but that is, the people will be too busy using it to give a damn about, about all that other stuff, I think.
They're going to care about the ones that give them the most value, which is truly going back to where the free market principles should take us, right? That's where they always take us.
And yeah, they're going to hear about, I don't think they're even going to hear about chains. I think they're going to hear about dApps. Did you see this dApp? This dApp is awesome. You got to get on it. Oh, cool. Oh, I can't see it. Oh, but that's because it's on, Europe chain. Oh, okay. That's because it's on, Telos, and, somehow it's been a year and you're not on Telos yet. By the way, everyone on the Telos, everyone that was on the EOS snapshot is going to be on Telos. So you're already going to have your exact same amount up to 40,000, right? Which means, and it's only 1,098 people who are going to take a haircut, and of those, a lot of people are still going to come out to be at the same or more purchase power, because since we lower the amount of the tokens, each token is worth 3 times more, right? So really, if you really look at it, I think it's like 500 accounts are getting less than they initially started out with on the EOS snapshot. And so basically, you know, we're building something, and we're going to distribute, you know, 90-something% of the high 90s to all the EOS holders, right? So basically, everyone just got more. You know, there's twice the network. There's a whole other network. It's a little different. Hopefully, those are good things, but it's still basically the EOSio you know and love and know how to use and can do on Scatter or EOS Voter or whatever wallet you like, right? The tools are already, like you mentioned, Blocktivity. I love Blocktivity. A huge day for me was when we got it set up that Blocktivity was going to list Telos, right? I can't wait. I'm telling you, I can't wait. I mean, here's the thing, that the stuff is going to, I don't like talking about price, but someday people are going to understand, and just like you said in the beginning, but someday people are going to understand the value, like the AVI, right? The how out of whack it is that this Telos is, you know, has whatever the price it does, and the fact that it's going to be in the top 4 transactional networks, right? In terms of TXs, right? It's good. That's where it's going to be in 2 weeks after launch, and just because of the power of EOSio and DPoS. So it's incredible. It's incredible to have that actual value.
Yeah, and like I said up here, you know, we were discussing the last hangout that we had here. I had a little presentation where I was trying to show people, you know, the gravity that we can kind of create between these various chains. And like you said, it's kind of crazy to think about it, but we're looking at a new web, right? Like, and it has to be very resilient, and there has to be a lot of redundancy to it. And one of the cool things about what you guys are doing is we might literally have it where dApps can potentially use multiple chains to provide their services, just in case something happens to another one, right? Or just,
why wouldn't they? Yeah, exactly.
So if we have that, and then you have a situation where all these delegated proof of stake and EOS chains exist with IBC, you never have to take your funds out of that ecosystem to do something, because it's so easy to do everything you need there. Well, then what does that do? That creates a situation where now all the Bitcoin and all the Ethereum and all those things are getting cashed out or sent into these ecosystems and then locked away there. And nobody ever wants to escape with their value because they can do everything there. They don't have to, and that's extra work for them, so they're not going to. So what does that do? That creates stickiness. And now we've essentially made it so every one of these DACs is a funnel to one another and to our tech. And now we are sitting here at a place where there's mass adoption, and we've gone beyond Bitcoin. And
yeah, absolutely. Hey, that'd be a good name for something.
Yeah, it would, wouldn't it? You'd think that I would talk about it more often. You know, the thing that I love here is that people like you, people like the guys over at Warbly, all of you guys who are, and girls, of course, who are thinking about this stuff. It's you people who are going to teach everybody. Like, I can keep telling people, right? And I will. Everybody here knows that, who's been paying attention. I won't stop telling. But the coolest thing is, even if they don't listen to me, well, maybe Doug came at them with an angle from Telos that I couldn't have hit. Maybe Warbly hit somebody across the head with a great idea that they're like, wow, that I didn't see that coming, that you guys could do that, right?
Right. And after me, the deluge, right? So as Julius Caesar said, when in Telos and Warbly actually launch, and frankly, when the open source Telos branch is all ready for people to poke around with and use however they want to create new expressions of this, which we support so much that we actually built tons of features and documentation into that with that in mind. When that happens, you are going to get so many chains coming out, because it's a great solution to a great problem, and and each one can be its own expression of that, right? And that's when we get the IBC and we solve the problem, which we at GoodBlock are actually already working on a version of this that records records tokens on multiple chains and has a decentralized hub for moving those transactions from chain to chain, so that your token is DPoS chain agnostic. And what that means is when all these chains come in, they don't have to go and screw around and try and get on Binance and do all these things, right? Which is impossible and a bad use of funds, and just and has many, let's just say, problematic, because I don't want to offend anyone that I'm working with right now, but it's problematic especially for smaller specific chains. They can rather than having their value stuck, like they can have dexes for value for tokens on their chain, but they can't easily pull value on and off. But once we get these tokens going that are decentralized, are able to be transferred in a decentralized way from chain to chain, and we're coming out with, it's going to be a standard that we come out with, not one thing, right? So people can apply it themselves. Then suddenly all these chains that are coming don't have to try and figure out how to get on the exchanges, the centralized exchanges. They can just move from chain to chain and take advantage of the decentralized exchanges there. Then the idea, people thinking about what chain is what, is just going to dissolve, because there'll be so many great ones. All people will think about is the dApps.
Yeah, and Alex said something here. I think it's a huge waste of funds to pay for play on an exchange. Perhaps one exception to that is unless your chain's only goal is to orchestrate a quick pump and dump. I will not say that that's always the case. However, I will say, I mean, if for those of you who are familiar with blockchain technology, I'm pretty sure most of them would agree that that is generally what happens to 80 to 90% of those chains. And most of them do not scale, aren't producing a bunch of value, don't have millions of transactions per day on them, as in, actually being
right. They're somebody went into GitHub, so figured out how to navigate GitHub, went in, discovered that all they really had to do was change the name,
yeah.
right, and post on bitcointalk.org, in the altcoins section, and do an announcement, and suddenly someone's going to buy it, especially if it's like a masternode coin where they feel like they can make 1,000% interest for a week. That's not at all what we're talking about here. That's not at all what we're talking about. We're talking about creating value, starting with the creation of value, not of actual value, right? Of utility, starting with the creation of utility and letting value catch up.
Yeah, and the cool thing, you mentioned that there are people you're working with who you don't want to offend, and I'm sure that it makes me kind of think that of course there's things that are centralized, there are things that need to be improved, but the great thing is whoever you're working with, these are the types of things that they want to be where they're at, working with people like you. They want to be working with people in this ecosystem, because these are the types of things that are going to set them above and beyond any of their competition if they start acquiring and leveraging these types of things or building these things, right? So I hope that the people you're working with do see the value in it, and I suspect they do, or else they wouldn't be working with you. But
we're very fortunate. Telos is already listed on 2 publicly announced exchanges, but which are Dexios and Chainrift, by the way. We have both EOS and EOS Telos and Bitcoin Telos trading pairs. I'm actually hugely excited about that. But while we can't announce it yet, we certainly have more on the sidelines. And the goal, of course, is to allow users to be able to buy in or sell their or say, I'm not of a mind to be interested in this, but thank you very much for the tokens. And get those sold to somebody who is excited about it, because we're not quite to that time yet where all these great spacey things that we want to do can be done. But this is how we get there.
For sure. And another thing, that one of the things that we learned in BitShares was, or that I learned anyway, was that for so long we were so intent on our technology having to be our technology that we sometimes forget that there's a community behind every coin, right? So there's nothing necessarily wrong with, for instance, like an exchange. An exchange needs to be, it's where it's at. It needs to, if it doesn't improve, it's going to have problems. But we're getting to the point where this technology will be improving, and the exchanges that are seeing that and are proactive are going to be enabling new things that other centralized, like that centralized exchanges can't offer. So,
yeah. But I mean, and exchanges, people still listen to the radio, right? Even though TV exists, somewhere out there, people still ride horses, even though there's cars and airplanes. These things don't really go away, but they become less important. And we will always have centralized exchanges because they will fit, as long as they fit the need of someone, and they will, right? And we'll also always have DEXs, which is a great movement. But really what we need to think, let's think beyond the DEX, the decentralized exchange, to a very, 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 very near future, when the tokens are all have the exchange function built in
inside of it.
Yeah. So I would say watch this space, right? We've announced there's some standards that we brought on in Telos that also are deployed on EOS, and I would say watch that space very carefully, because I personally believe that the tokens are going to be the exchanges, and in and of themselves, in an atomic, don't even need a DApp way of interacting. And I think that is so near that the year will end in 8, when that is our reality.
Well, I'll tell you, when I personally believe whenever that happens is when we see a moon. I don't see how we don't see everything go through the roof at that point in terms of delegated proof of stake chains. I mean, I don't like to talk about price, but in terms of mass adoption and people access it, and then what follows to me is like I said earlier, money follows value. So it's quite interesting to see where we're going, and to hear you talking about these things. These are the types of things that we have been talking about in the inner blockchain group for quite some time, and I know you're in there. And we have a lot of smart people working on trying to make this a reality.
Yeah, I've learned a lot there. And let me just back up 1 second and say what I'm talking about is that kind of thing that's going to happen so soon. I'm talking about happening, still being constrained to one chain, but the exact same basic mechanism is what then leads to the next step of sort of a moderate, level 3 DPoS IBC that I was talking about before.
Real quick, I don't want to get too far off, but I did miss somebody who asked a question. Iron Monkey asked about 5 minutes ago. Maybe I missed it, but can you tell us what dApps you will launch, if any? If you want to open up any of that, you're more than welcome to. If not, obviously we understand. But if you,
so we, it's a great question. I would love to be able to answer it. I feel that that all those dApps should be in charge of their own publicity as they choose, and they should decide when to announce that, and that's not my business to do for them.
Cool. Well, that's an honest answer, and I do appreciate you taking the time, Doug. We are running a little bit over, but I do want to open it up for anybody who has any questions or comments that you'd like to bring up before we do close this off for the after party.
I do want to, before we do, I'm here for as many questions that people have. I do want to say, if anyone, every time I talk, I want to say this. If anyone lost control, either they lost their keys or they lost control of their keys to their EOS snapshot account, that Telos is going to be based on, I want to make sure that everybody knows they can go to telosfoundation.io/recovery and get those keys changed, because there are people whose keys were stolen or phished or whatever, and the last thing we want to do is launch a new chain and not take steps to make sure that they get their own, that some thief is stealing their tokens across two chains now. So we are taking steps to do that, and we are going to make all those key changes available for future chains that want to use them, so that we can solve this problem once. So please go to telosfoundation.io/recovery, and there's a key recovery process there for anybody.
And just to make it, I think there's one thing that I do want to say is there are a lot of block producers who have stepped up and kind of stepped out of the comfort zone, while they're also working in EOS mainnet, to work with Telos, and they are very interested in the project. And I personally, I've been paying attention to you guys too, and I want to just say all the block producers and all the people who helped you guys, I want to thank them, because Doug, you and your team and the people who've been working on this, I've watched as you guys have done a lot of things. And yeah, I understand Block One has their own goals and their own things too, but some of the things that you guys did were things I think I really believe that if they would have been done in the very beginning when EOS was launched, it would have been a huge PR boost. It would have been very valuable for everybody, and the chain would have had a lot less FUD.
Yeah, we wouldn't have had to. Yeah, exactly. There would be no Telos then if they'd done about half the stuff that we're doing. There'd be no need. It'd be like, well, it's good enough.
Well, I suspect you guys would have probably found other things. You guys probably would have found other things to fix, but continue.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I did not set out going, hey, how am I going to fork EOS? It was it was not calculated. It's a response to what happened, and it's very daunting. If you're somebody who has, like me, who has kept his crypto identity, on the down low, and who just wants to go through and make dApps and things like that. The concept of stepping out front and putting a big old document together and trying to get people to rally behind it is frightening. I would not have done it if the system was really functioning well. I just simply wouldn't have. There's no conjecture. I wouldn't have done it if EOS was working pretty darn well. I would not have. I can't imagine that I would have done this. So.
So it was out of necessity, largely, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't want to do this. Look at all the time I have to spend on talking and to people and stuff. Who likes that? No.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's but to your original point, the people who came on board. By the way, we launched with a total of 12, between Good Block one of them. And Good Block, by the way, has no special place in this. We are just one of the contributors. We do have a lot of people working on it though. So we launched with 12, and you were one of them, one of those 12, by the way. And it's now grown to there well over 100 participants are going to be getting paid from this system, and not all of them are block producers at all. But we have right now, the last time I looked, we had 48 block producers on the testnet. Some of them in the group, some of them not. I mean, we've really come in 13 or 14 weeks from announcement, from a place where there was a lot of worry and FUD, and people just started out screaming scam, to a place now where we have these discussions, and we have them on the EOS channels sometimes, and and I get called into them because they're already talking about it, and it's such a change, right? So where are we going to be? Where are we going to be in 14 more weeks, which is not much time, right? It's probably the end of the year.
Yeah, well, and then I think, where are we going to be, like you said, the end of 2018? And, we've been here. I know I've been here since the beginning of Bitcoin, and over about 10 years. This is what we've seen in terms of progress. And we're about to reach this point where we're truly about to, like, if you watched our last hangout, you saw the slideshow, and I like to talk about the universes and the galaxies and cryptos and planets and all of these as different ecosystems with their own gravity. But we're about to jettison outside of just one use case into a world where it becomes real. And I want to thank everybody who's being part of that. And I want to thank you, Doug, for doing what you've done, and the people who've helped you for doing what they've done, whether it was out of necessity or because you absolutely wanted to from the beginning. To me, doesn't matter. I know what you said, so we have why you did it. But to me, I'm just glad that we're seeing it go beyond Bitcoin, right? That we're really seeing this getting ready to I think the next 5 years are going to be more is going to happen in the next 5 years than has happened in the entirety of crypto.
Oh, I think that's definitely true. And, you know, I don't think either you, I mean, like Bitcoin's been very, very good to me. And I think it's been very, very good to you. And I don't think I think you get more varies in your case, which, you know, which is wonderful. I think that, I don't hate on Bitcoin, but if I'm really being, in fact, I love it. I talk to people about it all the time. But if I'm really being honest, I have to say, I do not see Bitcoin being the platform. I don't see the case for the Bitcoin maximalism. I don't see the case. I don't see it going away either. But I don't see the case for it where that is the actual platform that becomes the World Wide Web of blockchain, right? And I think EOSCO is that platform, and I think it's going to be absolutely transparent whether you're, you know, in a very short time, whether you're on EOS or Telos. And I think that every additional chain that is functional and responsible and public, that is, you know, and decentralized, is a plus. And frankly, I think 2 months from now or less, when even Block One quotes the transactions, they're going to the transactions per day or per second or whatever, they are going to do them for EOSCO and include EOS and Telos and, you know, and others in what that TX, you know, the TPS figure is. I'm sure it's going to happen. I think that's going to happen before the end of the year too. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah, well, you know, we're already seeing them talk about this like this. That's what's blowing my mind. They're saying they call them sister chains, and I don't like it that way. I don't like to call it that, but they're already talking about Warbly and Telos to a degree. Now,
oh, they're coming out and talking about it now. Yeah, no, I know. Like Dan just said, you know, this is going to work all chains. I mean, that's interesting when he is pointing out that there's all chain compatibility on their wallet. That's very interesting. And who cares if they call it sister chains? There's a lot of things in the world that have stupid names that we've all accepted.
I just think that it's a little bit, it makes it confusing for newbies, I think. But then again, all of this is confusing for newbies. So what do you say, right? But what I will say, I think that we're in this place, like kind of what you were talking about. We're going to have all these different chains, and they're all going to be able to connect. And when Dan said that, and I read that, that was exactly what I read, and it made me kind of go, "Wow, that's a big deal that he's saying that." I'm glad, because it was one of my concerns that he wasn't thinking that. To be completely honest with you,
right? Yeah, mine too. You know, you don't want to. You know, it's like, it's a little bit like, because obviously we have a huge respect and gratitude for Dan and his vision and what he's built, and we wouldn't be here without that. I mean, that's one of those things that goes without saying that probably should be said. So that's how we feel. When you have that sort of one-sided relationship with somebody, you know, it's never fun, right? the disapproving dad, right? Well, we're gonna be at the San Francisco Hackathon, the whole the Good Block team and a lot of other people, and I'm very excited to, you know, maybe get a little bit of face-to-face and with some of these with some of our sister chain peeps.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing what comes from those future relationships. I look forward to watching all these different DAGs connect. And thanks again, Doug, for being here to discuss and explain this to people. And thank you guys for everybody over at Telos for doing what you guys have done. You guys have that list almost done. It's getting very, very close.
Thank you. It is getting close. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I will come in anytime, and I'll, since I have a way of just talking and talking, I'll kind of sign off unless anybody has any specific questions. Thanks, Fuzzy, for having me here. It's been a great chance to talk to this whole audience, which I've been, I've always enjoyed listening to.
And thank you guys, of course, Doug, and thank everybody who's been listening to this. For those of you who've been around, you'll pay attention. You'll know, if you're paying attention, you'll notice that we've been talking about this stuff for quite some time, and it's starting to come to pass. And this is something I think is very important that people recognize. Sharing our content and telling people about what we're doing helps them more than it helps me, more than it helps, because I'm in a place where I don't need to do this. That's why I do it, because a lot of people are out there, and I'm not saying everyone's doing this, but by and far, the majority of the industry where I go out and I look, most videos are when moon. And they're talking about things that really don't matter to somebody who's trying to take hard-earned money and put it into something in the hopes of it being valuable someday. So it's more important than anything that everybody out there who has gained substantially from hearing what we've discussed coming to pass. For those of you who believe that we're going to continue being this accurate, it's worth it to let people know what we talk about here and the players who bring these ideas and the things that they're doing, because this is the future. And if you don't follow the moon, chasing it, eventually you'll find yourself out in the stars where it's far better, where there are many options. And that's where we want to take you. So thank you, everybody, for joining up tonight. We will have the after party where we like to discuss things offline. But I do appreciate everybody who makes this possible. And please, again, share this content. Let people know that we have these every other week. And with that said, I think that we're good for the night. And thank you again for everybody joining up. Please share our content, and please continue thinking about the value propositions, the true value propositions, not necessarily the market cap. The market cap will come, and that's just going to come with the mass adoption that only we can bring with our tech. So thanks, everybody. Have a good one, and I look forward to mass adoption and beyond Bitcoin.